Hey, Allegra.
Hi, Russ.
Isn't it weird whenever we do one of these, we're wearing the same clothes? Like, we never change clothes. What's up with that?
It's basically like our anime outfits.
It is. Week after week, we wear the same clothes when we shoot this promo. Today, I wanted to share the history of GoldenEye 007 on the N64.
A game I've never played.
Yeah, well, it was very good when it came out.
I
don't know how well it's aged per se, but I think everyone that has played video games in the last 20 years, except for Allegra, has very fond, strong memories about GoldenEye.
Yes.
And I thought I'd dig through the archives and uncover the history of how the game was made. Some pretty surprising stuff in there.
Especially for me as someone who's never played it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's crazy that the people that made Donkey Kong Country pivoted and made GoldenEye one of the most seminal first-person shooters ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, the show is called History of Fun. It's a podcast. We do it weekly. If you dig this video, you might enjoy listening to the audio version. It is available on your podcasting platform of choice, whether that's Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, or what are some other ones?
Ooh, Podcatcher, is that a thing?
Yeah, sure. I use Overcast, very good one. Pretty much on everything, so you can just search History of Fun.
It's on Spotify?
It is also on Spotify.
Yeah.
We're on everything, people. Anyway, enjoy this episode, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Hello and welcome to the History of Fun, where we explore the hidden backstories behind the things you love to do. My name is Russ Frushtick, and I am joined by Chris Plant. Hello, Chris.
Hello.
And Allegra Frank. Hello, Allegra.
Hi.
And I wanted to say thank you to everyone at home for listening. We've had such a great response from everyone. Lovely reviews in iTunes and various other places.
Hey. It's called Apple Podcasts.
Yeah, Russ.
I'm sorry. Apple
Jeez.
Podcasts.
Get a computer.
If you have been enjoying the show and feel up to it and wouldn't mind leaving us a rating or a review, please do so. It's a huge, tremendous, massive help, and it helps us continue the show. It makes Allegra very happy, right, Allegra?
So happy.
You can hear it in her voice, the enthusiasm. So we really, really appreciate that and all the support we've gotten. With that out of the way, we have a very
thank goodness. That weight is off my shoulders.
Finally.
I can exhale.
With that out of the way, we're going to talk about a little unknown game that came out for the N64 called GoldenEye 007.
You look so excited.
I'm excited. I think this is the first time where I've been able to talk about something that I was like have like very strong memories of. Because like I remember like a cold dark winter morning, and I was probably like 10 or so, and I would be in the basement playing GoldenEye and shooting poor Russian soldiers in the arm, and then they'd like wave their arm, and I'd be like, yeah, got them.
They'd wave their arm.
I don't know. I have very
Russ.
strong GoldenEye memories, and they generally aren't mostly about multiplayer, although I did play multiplayer. It's mostly about the single player, but I know a lot of
Because
people.
you were alone most of the time.
Because I was a lonely child.
Oh, what a sweet boy.
Did you guys play GoldenEye at all? Have you ever played Allegra? Obviously, it's a little before your time.
Honestly, I have never, ever in my life played it, but I was in like a used game store a couple years ago, like 2 or 3 years ago, and they had like N64 games.
Sure.
And I saw GoldenEye for $10.
Oh, that's not bad.
And I bought it, but I still
Did you
never...
have an N64?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
I still have never played it though.
Oh.
But I own it.
Plant?
I can't imagine going and playing it now. If you didn't before, I love that game. I was obsessed with that game. Some games just don't hold up. That doesn't mean they're not important. But holy cow, like playing a shooter on a Nintendo 64 controller, we have to like aim with the C buttons and also the right trigger. It is a messy, messy game. I don't want to brag, but I may have been defended. Like I'll just say I was the neighborhood champion of GoldenEye.
Out of how many people? How many children were involved?
I mean, probably about like 8. So like pretty big deal.
Sure.
But it was also like, looking back on it, kind of unfair
Because you played as Odd Job?
No, I didn't do that, and I let people play as Odd Job, but we only played Complex with either remote mines or proximity mines, as you do. And that really is a mode that once you learn how to exploit it, nobody has a chance of beating you.
Yeah, that's true.
You kind of can get into a rhythm, and let's just say, I was really good, you know?
King of the rhythm.
Really, really
You
good.
were in that rhythm.
Chris Plant, rhythm plant
Rhythm
is what we call him. We're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, though, because I wanted to go back to the beginnings. As we might know, GoldenEye was developed by a company called Rare. Rare is known for many, many games. Conker's Bad Fur Day is one of them, although this is an E-rated podcast. That is certainly not an E-rated game. But they also made Donkey Kong Country, and that was their big, big success of the SNES era. And so they decided, okay, we've got this Bond license. We've secured the Bond license. We are going to make a Bond game. And their initial idea for this Bond game was to make it just like Donkey Kong Country, but with Bond. They wanted to make a side-scrolling 2D James Bond game.
So you would like play as James Bond.
Yeah, but you'd roll around and eat bananas. Pretty authentic. No, it was essentially like, there was that arcade game where you'd shoot aliens in the face, the side-scrolling. Well, I don't know. That doesn't really narrow it down. But you were a spy, and you'd start with the parachuting. I don't remember the game.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, it was supposed to be that. But the Martin Hollis, who is the game director, decided that he wanted to take advantage of a new piece of technology. And that technology was known as the Ultra 64.
Ooh.
Now, people who know their Nintendo history know that the Ultra 64 became the Nintendo 64, right?
What if you were like not sure what that became? Like Ultra 64? I don't know. It's hard to narrow that down.
The cool thing about the Ultra 64 was specifically its name, because later development Nintendo platforms included Dolphin.
Yeah.
And what was the Switch called? NX. The NX.
Oh, the NX. The best one was Revolution.
Revolution was very good for the GameCube, right?
The Wii.
Oh, the Wii. I'm sorry. Yes, GameCube was Dolphin. So they knew this platform was coming out, so they decided to build a team that would take advantage of this new, incredible 3D generation that was on the cusp of happening. It wasn't just Faceball anymore. 3D was going to be everywhere. So they decided to make a 3D on-rails shooter inspired by Virtua Cop. But Chris Plant's a big Sega fan, so I'm sure he has
Virtua Cop is a masterpiece.
Yes.
Virtua Cop, for people who don't know, imagine Virtua Fighter back in the early days. So, like, characters made out of about 12 polygons altogether. And then you go around, like, a building that is just bare bones architecture. Maybe
lots
like
of squares.
Yeah, squares, and you shoot them in the face. The aiming is not especially good. It's also perfect because it was made by Sega. So
the aiming was not good, but it was also perfect.
Listen, that's what you learn as a Sega fan. The game doesn't work. Sonic the Hedgehog, yeah, it's a mess. It's the best game ever made.
So they had this very ambitious plan. Again, early days of 3D. They wanted to do a shooter. They had never really done that before as a company. So in order to do that, they built a crack team of 10 people, 8 of whom had never made a professional video game. It was a massively inexperienced team.
Oh, God.
They brought on some people that had done some modeling work, a little bit of like hacky games that they've done on themselves. But as an actual professional product, 80% of the team had never made a professional game before. So this was their first time, and it sort of seemed like it was going to be a disaster from the outset. They had a lot of access. They were able to visit the sets of the movie GoldenEye. Great film, by the way. Really holds up. They were able to visit all the sets, but as they were starting to develop, they realized how long this project was going to take. The first year and a half, they didn't even have the specs of what the N64 was going to be like.
Wow.
They had no idea. So there was a lot of X factors that they didn't really know how to fill. They basically just, as they were developing it in that first year and a half, they just took a stab. They guessed at what it was going to play like and what the specs were going to be. And what they came up with was essentially a hacked together piece of hardware controlled by a Sega Saturn controller. So that was all they had. Unfortunately, when they finally did find out what the specs were from Nintendo, it was about 75% less powerful than they thought they were going to have.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it was a big disaster. Carl Hilton was one of the designers. He spoke to a Now Gamer, and actually a really good retrospective, which is no longer online, but you can read it on the Wayback Machine. He basically said that color textures cost a lot more in terms of processing power, and because they were trying to cut down all of the high processing power stuff just to get it jammed onto the N64, they ended up making almost all of GoldenEye in grayscale, and then using like a little bit of tweaks to like add some green for the jungle and stuff like that. But when you think back to GoldenEye, it is like a lot of blacks and whites and grays. Like all of the maps are like very simple, and that's just because they were like super, super easy for them to actually get them working. Unfortunately, that didn't really end up great for the frame rate, which again, I know you haven't played it, Allegra. Plant, you remember, it does not run great.
No, but like that's again a thing of back then, nothing ran great. So
yeah, that's true.
Like frame rate was so far from our minds, it was just like, oh, this is just how games feel. Games feel slow. Unfortunately, when you go back and you like, it's like you tasted like True Coke Zero. I'm trying to play to Allegra here. And then you go back and you try like Diet Coke, and it's like, what? Why would I want this? I have the greatness already. I've never had either, but I just feel like I'm connecting with the youth right here.
You are. I completely understand now, and I am just as devastated.
I'm glad we could connect things for people. So obviously, things are not working great. They're also running into an issue with delays, specifically that they are risking the potential to come out with GoldenEye 007, the game, after the next Bond movie comes out. Tomorrow Never Dies came out after GoldenEye in 1997. And at this point, because the game had been delayed about a year and a half, they were really getting close to the point where like the new Bond movie was going to come out, and then this game was going to happen that was like for a super old Bond movie that no one really remembers at that point. It was bad, but something saved them. And that thing was Super Mario 64. I guess it was just called Mario 64? Super Mario 64?
I think it was Super Mario 64.
Yeah, it was called to be clear, Mario. Super Mario
64. Got it. Perfect. Before that game came out, obviously for me and a lot of other people, it was a kind of a revelation. Mario 64 was like a big deal. And even for the GoldenEye developers, it was a big deal because they realized, we can make, hey, speaking of great frame rate, by the way, Chris Plant in Mario 64, just saying. But they saw this game and they were like,
got him.
We can make a 3D game that's like a little more involved than just like, wow, like a gimmick of, you can explore 3D environments. So after playing that, they started adding things like objectives and like AI that you would follow around. She's going to hack this thing while you defend her, stuff like that to make the gameplay a little more involved than just like go from A to B while shooting everyone. That really started them on this sort of they were making a lot of progress here with not only gameplay but also just like getting the technology working in such a way that like they were finding ways to cut down on the resource spend. So because they were so late, they started reusing a lot of the assets that they had already made because it meant, hey, we can just copy and paste. The radar in multiplayer, there's like a little radar disc. And if you look at it, it actually looks kind of weird on one side, like a little bit blurry. And it's because they just used the texture of an oil drum for the radar, which is kind of neat. They did a lot of work to kind of just constantly reuse whatever assets they could, which is a very common tactic now in bad games. But I don't think GoldenEye got a lot of crap for it in the past.
Can I ask a question about this period of time?
Sure.
And like you can confirm this. This is a rumor that I've always heard.
Yeah.
That around this period of time, Shigeru Miyamoto, the creator of Mario himself,
Yeah.
saw the game, and they were like, because they were like, we need to work hard to make sure that like we have some good games for Nintendo 64, not just Nintendo's games. And they're like, okay, what do you think of it? Like, we're really proud of it. And he was like, it's interesting, but you should take out all the guns.
I think that is true, right?
That is somewhat true. So Martin Hollis, as I mentioned, the game director, did speak to Miyamoto about the game. Obviously, it was a big project for Nintendo, and Miyamoto was very concerned about the violence specifically. I have a quote here from Martin Hollis, who reported by The Guardian, who said, speaking of Miyamoto, he suggested it might be nice if, at the end of the game, you got to shake hands with all your enemies in the hospital. So it turns out that no one died. You were just good friends with them, and you went and visited them in the hospital.
So what people can't see right now is the producer of our show is borderline about to die in the production room. His entire body is convulsing, leaning back in his chair, and
Pedro
I'm
loved that
genuinely
story.
worried about him.
He's okay.
Poor producer Pedro. Oh my god, why would they shake hands?
Because they were friends.
Like, sorry, we all shot each other, and I'm fine. You're in the hospital, potentially like disabled for the rest of your life.
Yeah, you do actually blow up Sean Bean's character at the end of that movie/game. But I like the fact that he was like, no, he found a way to come out of it. It's so sweet. Miyamoto's such a pure heart. He really, I kind of wish they did that, to be honest. The way they got around the violence concerns was that they ended up introducing all of the characters that you meet with like overly stylized like movie introductions to make it seem like, oh, this is not realistic. This is clearly a movie. But the hospital idea, I think, is way, way better. Okay, so they are reusing a bunch of assets. They are just trying to put together all of these different things that they've been inspired by, Mario 64, stuff like that. David Doak, one of the other designers, did mention at a certain point they were really having a tough time. This is a quote, again, him speaking to Now Gamer. He said, you could hear the barrel being scraped, collect 5 arbitrary pieces, but honestly, Mario had that kind of S as well, which is pretty boring. So they basically went ahead and made sure that even if you were doing like a bunch of boring stuff like run A to B, whatever, each level ended with blow this thing up. And you do that, actually. You do blow a lot of things up at the end of levels for no particular reason. So they were very smart about making sure that the mechanics worked well enough to keep the pace up.
I feel like every game should kind of just work like that. Like
Miyamoto does not agree with you.
No, but I mean, like, you just kind of run toward some end goal, and then you just blow a bunch of stuff up at the very end.
Yeah. What do you think, Plant?
I don't know.
We spoke briefly about some of the poor soldiers that you meet and shoot throughout the game. The game was actually really innovative for AI. Specifically, the idea of a stealth shooter was like very much in its infancy. This is before Thief, like right around the same time, but slightly before Thief came out. So stealth shooters were like really not a thing. It introduced the idea of alertness, where essentially if you fire, like a cone of alertness happened around you where enemies would spot you. You could peek through windows and they wouldn't see you. So like a bunch of stealth stuff like that, which was, again, very innovative. But all of these innovations came at the cost of the fact that like they did not have a big team. So they were just kind of scrambling to put different elements into the game, one of which was motion capture. There's a lot of motion capture in GoldenEye.
Wow.
It's pretty advanced, again, for its time. I think one of them that people remember is the guard with the shaking knees. If you like hold up a guard, he'll like shake his knees like he's scared, which is very sweet. That guard's name was Duncan Botwin, who worked at Rare, and he did every one of the motion capture feats in the game, specifically regarding the guards and their many deaths. How he did that was kind of intense. Graham Norgate, again, one of the game designers, said of Botwin, they basically had to push him over in the motion capture studio to get realistic falls and deaths out of him. because otherwise it would look like he was protecting himself. This is a quote from Graham. They were.
I'm sorry. I want to hear the quote, but like, he gets shot in the privates.
Yeah,
and it looks like it hurts really bad in the game.
Sure.
Did they kick him in the privates?
That's a valid question. Let's look at the quote from Graham. Quote, there were many times when we'd get him to close his eyes and he didn't know when he was going to be pushed. He went through a lot for that game. There was blood.
No.
Yeah. So poor Duncan Botwin really got put through the ringer.
Did he volunteer for this?
Well, I mean, I would do it.
You would?
I don't know if I would do it knowing what I know now and all the brutality that was involved, but like, you wouldn't want to like do motion capture for a game. That seems like it'd be fun.
Not if I'm like getting punched in the nuts and there was blood.
I don't have any indication that he was actually punched in the nuts, although it is a very convincing performance, almost to the point where I think he deserves some sort of award for that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Unless he was
it's a
punched
little
in the
over the
nuts.
top. It's like a little Jerry Lewis at times.
You just said
like
it was
every
super
character's
realistic.
like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, you could add that sound effect to every death, and you'd be like, yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, but don't you think like in that early, like they did not have a lot of like facial detail. You needed like a very campy. You really had to sell it.
A pantomime, if you will.
Yes, exactly. You had to really go over the top. But all that technology of like shooting a guy in the foot and then like him reacting to that, that's like all super new stuff that GoldenEye totally broke new ground on, which is very, very cool. So getting closer and closer, they have dumb ideas for the game's development, one of which was that in order to reload the gun, you had to pull the rumble pack out of the back of the gun and slam it back in.
What?
Which from like a tactile sense is kind of cool.
Yeah.
This isn't that unusual, too, because think about like every current VR shooter. Like, every VR game is like, and then you have to manually clean the gun every 15 shots. And once you've cleaned it, you have to rebuild it.
Yeah, that idea was strictly vetoed. They definitely did not allow that. Nintendo did not allow that, mostly for gameplay implications. Like, can you imagine what multiplayer would have been like if everyone's just on the couch being like, where's the rumble?
Scrambling to take out the rumble
Yeah,
pack.
it wouldn't have worked. It would have been bad. So I did want to mention multiplayer. So obviously multiplayer is a very big part of GoldenEye. I think it's probably why it did so well, why people remember it. It was also a complete and total afterthought. Steve Ellis was the guy who designed multiplayer. Essentially, one guy of the 10-person team spent 6 weeks making multiplayer on his own, and that is the GoldenEye multiplayer.
Just one dude.
One dude.
Wow.
They had no intention of ever including it, and he was like, you know what? I think I could do multiplayer. So he went in a back room and made this mode in 6 weeks, and it's now what we remember GoldenEye for, which is just amazing. Plant, you use the proximity mines?
Yeah, proximity. We used proximity. We used pistols one-shot kill. Was very popular.
Yeah, I like pistols one-shot kill. Yeah, that was good. And you've never played it, so you don't know.
I'm just like cringing.
Slappers. You ever use slappers?
We did slappers only, but that was like my least favorite.
Yeah, slappers only is not fun at all. But that ended up being, again, why the game did so tremendously well. The game sold 8 million copies and was the biggest N64 game in the U.S. It sold more in the U.S. than Mario 64 or Ocarina or Mario Kart.
Wow.
I'm sorry. Ocarina?
Ocarina.
It's not Ocarina?
I mean, whatever.
Is it a Mario Ocarina? Wait, you say
Ocarina.
The O in Ocarina, but you say the O in Mario.
I'm going to cut out all of this.
Don't ever listen to how Russ pronounces things.
I just love it. It's like you're such a splendid man.
Ocarina of Time. Mario Kart. GoldenEye sold more than those in the U.S. Worldwide, those games did beat GoldenEye, but worldwide it was the number 4 game on the N64. But again, this like stupid movie license game that no one knew what they were doing ended up being this massive success and like a really like genre defining game that we still remember. So that was kind of crazy. It was released on.
I have a crackpot theory. I want to run this past you, both of you.
Yeah.
I think maybe the reason it became so big is like, well, one, like a shooter. People needed something else to play on Nintendo 64. There were not a ton of great options after you got past like the Nintendo games.
Did people even want like, I don't know, were shooters? I guess on PC with Doom and stuff like that.
Yeah, there hadn't been like a really good one. But
on consoles, there wasn't one, yeah.
Yeah, I also think like the appeal of it, and this is something I think like modern shooters have lost almost entirely, is it's like fun without being like too fun, like without being like goofy, without being a circus. But like you play it, there were all those Easter eggs. You could have big head mode, you could have paintball mode. When you shot people, they did perform like Jerry Lewis. It wasn't like, oh, I just murdered like 10
it was
people.
for Miyamoto, but for everyone else, sure. They thought it was campy.
But it looked very campy.
Yeah.
There was like a silliness about it. You got the rewards after multiplayer matches that weren't based off of always skill. It was like quirky things that you did. You were most likely to use these things. There was just like a joy to that game that I miss so much when I play shooters that so often now are like, you did it. You are the most efficient murderer on planet Earth. Congratulations.
Yeah, that's true. It was simpler times back then.
Like, it makes me think of, like, PUBG, which is, like, also extremely silly, and it's just a bunch of people running around naked, and you get, like, a chicken dinner at the end. Like, that seems like a similarly, like, fun, kind of goofy multiplayer game, but otherwise, like, yeah, most of them are, like, super gritty and realistic, and it's a war.
Or it's like full cartoon, where it's like Fortnite, and it's like, you're a crocodile. Which, hey, I like that. Just goes a little bit too far.
I did want to mention the game itself was released on a 96 megabyte cartridge in 1997, which is kind of funny. That is 2 years after the movie came out.
Wow.
Yeah. Tomorrow Never Dies would come out shortly thereafter, but they did manage to beat out Tomorrow Never Dies.
Okay, was Rare, maybe you'll get to like how this was reviewed, but was Rare shocked that this game actually turned out at all?
They knew what they had. Like, they knew it was going to be fun. Nintendo was shocked on two fronts. Nintendo, knowing how long this was taking, actually sent Rare a letter that was like, hey, you guys should cancel this game. At this point, it's really not looking good. And I've got a quote here from Mark Betteridge, who spoke to Edge Magazine, saying that he got this letter from Nintendo and just didn't give it to the development team, knowing full well that it would like freak them the hell out. So he held on to it until they could finish the game, and then he showed it to them, which was very nice. But yeah, so Nintendo was worried. They did have a showing at E3 the year before, that year that it came out. So the game came out in August. They showed an E3 a couple months before that, and the E3 showing was very good. Like, the response was very good from press, so they were more encouraged by that. But even then, like, at this point, you've got such an expensive development cycle. Could they make that up? There was a lot of doubt and worry about it. And yeah, but obviously it ended up being a massive success, 8 million copies, and very, very good for them. And that's how GoldenEye sort of came about. I have a bunch of fun facts, but did you guys have any questions about the actual development of it?
I have a question.
Sure.
Which is sort of tangential, but I know that they like remade it.
Yes.
And that wasn't good.
Yeah, people did not like GoldenEye Reloaded, which was developed by Activision and I think Raven, I want to say. As sort of Plant has alluded to a little bit, the gameplay itself has not aged very well at all. And people have a fondness for the brand, but you really would need to completely overhaul the gameplay to make it more modern, which they did in the remake. Reloaded does feel very, very different, but at that point, it still needs to be a good shooter, and Reloaded was not a good shooter. Mm-hmm. So, unfortunately, there was only so much. Also, I think people have fondness for like the multiplayer maps, like Plant mentioned Facility and Aztec and a bunch of other ones. But the second you put like actual geometry and things in those maps, and they're not just like square rooms, you can't really recognize them. Like they don't look like what you remember.
And
so it was
they're not
just too
meant
removed.
There's like no verticality. And there is kind of, but they're not meant for verticality because the aiming
Yeah, you couldn't aim up,
pretty
really.
flat. So yeah, the game changes very quickly once you make it easy to actually aim up and down.
Yeah. Okay, fun facts time. We mentioned that Nintendo wanted to cancel the game. Nintendo did end up canceling a GoldenEye game for the Virtual Boy.
What?
There was a Virtual Boy in development, a GoldenEye game that was in its process, so much so that there are screenshots of the game that exist on the internet right now, but it was canceled. It was a racing game, which
Does that make sense?
Just what everyone wanted.
Was Rare making that too?
No, that was a different studio. It was very red, as all the Virtual Boy games were, and I don't know a whole lot more about it. The internet has sort of lost the thread apart from those screenshots that exist. But yeah, it was canceled. It never came out, mostly due to the Virtual Boy being a total disaster and not due to people not wanting a GoldenEye game. This fun fact doesn't really relate to the game itself, but I found out and was so pleased by it. So the movie GoldenEye had a theme song, which was written and performed by Bono and The Edge of U2 fame. Unfortunately, they were not the original people who wrote the theme song for that movie. The original people was a band called Ace of Base. Do you know Ace of Base?
Yeah.
I saw the sign.
I saw the sign and many, many other hits. Ace of Base actually wrote the theme song for GoldenEye that was eventually replaced. But if you want to hear that theme song, Google Ace of Base, the song The Juvenile, because it's the exact same song. They just replace every mention of GoldenEye with The Juvenile.
What does that mean?
Gosh. Every time in the lyrics GoldenEye appeared, they just snuck in The Juvenile.
The Juvenile.
It's pretty good. And actually, the song itself sounds like a Bond song. You can listen to it on YouTube, and it really would have made sense. And sadly, Ace of Base was never seen again. The other thing I found, the Daily Mail. We all know the Daily Mail
reputable
for their
news source.
quality news reporting. Ran a story in 1999 about a 2-year-old baby who played GoldenEye 007 for 10 hours a day. And the parents thought that was the best way to calm him, so much so that they wanted to get the portable version for holiday, for their holiday. That's what they call vacation in England. Now, I should mention the Daily Mail makes stuff up. But there was a photo of a baby sitting in a chair in front of N64. And that alone made me want to include it. They even got a psychologist to comment saying that the baby should really only be playing the game for 2 hours a day.
Like, babies aren't even awake for like 10 hours.
You know what? This baby found a way. He just wanted to get all those secrets, get that big head mode unlocked. Yeah, and that's it for fun facts, and that's pretty much it for GoldenEye.
Can I add one more thing? My absolute favorite thing about GoldenEye?
Yeah.
It gave us the best meme ever.
Oh.
And it's essentially been wiped off the internet, which makes it even more precious. So, some backstory first. With GoldenEye, there's a real thing you can do with the game. This would be a great thing for you to test, Allegra. You put the game in a Nintendo 64, you turn it on, you start to play the game, and then you flip the entire Nintendo 64 with the game still in it, upside down.
Yeah. And
the characters, as if they themselves are being flipped, begin to spasm and contort and float. So their limbs are floating shooting in every direction. And this was figured out by some players of the game in Japan, and they loved it. And they created it as a meme where they would set it to the song called, I believe, Get Down. But it's Get Down.
Yeah.
And they would jump in the air and freeze frame themselves moving. So it looked like it was a video of them doing exactly what happens in GoldenEye, where they are floating in midair, shooting their arms and legs in every direction. And it was kind of like, remember that meme where it's like, everything's normal, and then the bass drops, and now everything's wacky?
Yeah.
Sure.
I think Ajit Pai just did a version of it 20 years too late. But it's kind of like that, where everybody's normal during the build-up of the song, and then the chorus comes and they like go into full get down.
I don't. There's no way
the original Harlem Shake.
That you really think that's like a recreatable thing with GoldenEye?
What do you mean? Oh
like,
yeah.
Why would that even happen?
Video games are weird. I mean, back when you were talking about them not knowing how the hardware worked, like today, that's not a huge deal because most games are kind of like PCs. Like most consoles have similar architecture to a PC.
Sure.
But back then, like the Sega Saturn, you would pull graphics off of its sound card. Like the reason you can't emulate Sega Saturn games is because like, I don't know, where are you going to draw power from? I guess the sound card's not being used. Let's have all the graphics come off that thing. Like video games, they were so weird back in the day that like why that would happen, I don't know.
I like the idea that like there was like a graphics card that was just floating around in the N64, and if you flipped it around, it would just like, well, we'll see what happens.
This changes the entire physics of the game.
It does.
But yes, the meme is great. You should look for it. Good luck finding it because I think the copyright holder of that song went to town eventually and like removed the vast majority of it. Is it House of Pain?
Yeah, didn't they sing Get Down? Oh, no, they sang Jump Around. Never mind.
Oh, my gosh.
I did want to mention, I mentioned them briefly, the great Guardian article, which is reporting on a Martin Hollis talk that he gave. And there's and the Now Gamer retrospective, which, again, can only really be found on with the Wayback Machine. But they basically brought together 4 of the 10 designers of GoldenEye for like a meet and greet reunion. And there's like a lot of really fun factoids from that. So props to those 2 places. And that's GoldenEye. I kind of want to go back and play it, even though I know how bad it's going to be.
I can bring it in.
I think if there was a control, the problem is the N64 controllers degrade so heavily to the point of not being able to use them. If there was a controller that could like play it, like if it came out on Switch, I would buy it in a heartbeat. And I know it would be bad, but like,
and it can't.
Why not? Oh, because the licensing.
Rare.
Yeah. So that like
well,
that's,
not Rare.
That's
the
a small piece of the story. Rare is owned by Microsoft now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly.
The GoldenEye license has like shifted. James Bond license has shifted between Activision, EA, and I don't even know who the current owner is.
Yeah.
It's like
it's sad.
Yeah, I think Reggie himself tried. I think. Oh wait, wasn't that a thing? I think there was a working version of it even for Xbox, and I think it largely boils down to like Microsoft and Nintendo getting along. And I
write your letters, people. There's only one way for this to happen. Write those letters. Mm-hmm. Send them in to Reggie@Seattle.com.
Seattle2.
Just write Reggie on an envelope, stick it in a mailbox.
It'll get him. Who else
like
could
Santa Claus?
Anyway, this has been the History of Fun, where we explore the hidden backstories behind the things you love to do. Once again, thank you so much to all the listeners and people that have enjoyed our stuff and written in and stuff like that. Obviously, if you have any topic ideas, you can write them in to our Twitter account, The History of Fun on Twitter. And thank you again so much, and we'll see you next week.